The captain took the blame.
The young sailor choked out tears falling freely.
He falsified the report so I wouldn't go to military prison. He lost his insurance, he's selling his medals, and he let everyone in town think he was a drunk driver, just to save my life.
The heavy crescent wrench hit the drywall with a sickening crack. It missed Arthur Vance's head by less than 6 inches.
Arthur didn't flinch.
He didn't shout. The 59-year-old Navy captain simply bent down, picked up the wrench from the concrete floor and wiped a smear of grease off the handle with a shop towel.
The appointment is in 10 minutes, Ben,
Arthur said.
His voice was calm.
Too calm.
The kind of flat, weathered tone that usually took 3 combat deployments to perfect.
I'm not wearing it.
Ben shouted. The 11-year-old sat defensively in his wheelchair, his knuckles white as he gripped the armrests. He glared across the cluttered garage at the corner workbench.
Resting under the harsh fluorescent work light was the Apex Stride. It was a $400,000 piece of carbon fiber robotic engineering designed to do what Ben's shattered right tibia currently could not.
it's just an initial fitting.
Arthur said, placing the wrench neatly back into the red toolbox.
It's a cage.
Ben's voice cracked thick with the jagged, uncontrollable anger of a boy who had lost too much too fast.
You put me in this chair and now you want to put me in that thing so you don't have to look at what you did. I hate you.
Arthur stopped moving. His broad shoulders stiffened beneath his faded grey t-shirt. For a split second, something completely unguarded and desperate fractured the edges of his stoic expression. But he crushed it down just as quickly, sealing it away behind years of military discipline. He didn't defend himself. He didn't correct the boy. He just accepted the hatred like a man who believed he deserved it.
Nora Davies stood quietly in the open driveway, watching the scene unfold.
She had been a community care nurse for 12 years. She had walked into homes destroyed by illness, by addiction, and by grief. She knew exactly what a broken family looked like. But the scene in this dusty, oil-stained garage was entirely different. The file in her passenger seat said Captain Arthur Vance had lost control of his vehicle on a rainy highway 8 months ago, permanently altering his son's life. But as Nora watched the decorated officer absorb the brutal words of his child without a single argument, her clinical instincts flared. People who were genuinely guilty usually made excuses. They deflected.
They tried to buy forgiveness.
Arthur Vance wasn't doing any of that. He was doing something far more dangerous. He was standing completely still, letting his son destroy him. Nora adjusted the strap of her medical bag, stepped over the threshold into the garage, and cleared her throat.
I prefer to do my own fittings.
She said, her voice cutting through the heavy, suffocating air.
And I don't work with patients who throw tools at my equipment.
Ben blinked. He was used to nurses who spoke to him in high, gentle voices. He was used to pity. He wasn't used to a woman who looked at him like he was simply a math problem waiting to be solved. Nora walked past Arthur without acknowledging his military rank. She set her medical bag on the workbench right next to the 400 Surugunal's exoskeleton.
I'm Nora Davies.
She said, pulling on a pair of nitrile gloves.
And I don't care if you hate the machine, Ben. But I do care if your muscles atrophy so badly that you can never use your leg again with or without it.
Ben crossed his arms, his jaw set tight.
My dad paid for it. Tell him to wear it.
Your dad's tibia isn't healing from a severe compound fracture.
Nora replied evenly. She knelt in front of the wheelchair.
May I roll up your pant leg just to check the surgical site? No machines today.
Ben hesitated. He glanced at Arthur, who was standing quietly by the tool chest, watching Nora with careful, guarded eyes. Finally, Ben gave a stiff nod. Nora gently rolled up the loose fabric of the boy's sweatpants. Her clinical demeanour held perfectly still, but her mind immediately snagged on an anomaly. The medical file in her car stated that Ben had been injured in a high-speed vehicle collision. A dashboard impact typically caused specific blunt force trauma.
Clean brakes. Posterior dislocations.
But the scarring on Ben's lower right leg was completely wrong for a car crash.
The soft tissue damage was extensive, wrapping around the calf in a jagged, uneven pattern.
The surgical notes had described comminuted fragmentation bone crushed into multiple pieces. Looking closely at the healed skin, Nora recognized the distinct physical signature of a crush injury. It looked exactly like the industrial accidents she used to see when she worked near the manufacturing plants. Like something incredibly heavy and metallic had been dropped directly onto the bone, pinning the limb with hydraulic force. Nora kept her expression neutral, her thumbs gently checking the circulation near Ben's ankle. Good pulse. She stood up, pulling off her gloves. She looked at Arthur. The captain was still watching her. He wasn't hovering like an overprotective parent. He stood with the relaxed, deeply ingrained posture of a man who was used to standing watch.
The incision is healing, Earl.
Nora said to Arthur.
But the muscle tension is terrible. We need to start manual therapy before we even think about turning on the stride.
Arthur gave a single firm nod.
Whatever you think is best, Ms. Davies.
Nora picked up her bag.
She looked at the expensive robotic brace, then at the captain, and finally at the boy's mangled leg. Someone in this garage was lying. Arthur's cell phone buzzed against the metal workbench. He glanced at the caller ID, his jaw tightening just a fraction.
Excuse me.
Arthur said quietly. He stepped out of the side door into the driveway, pulling the heavy door shut behind him. The silence in the garage was immediate. Nora didn't waste it. She applied a warm compress to Ben's calf, waiting a few seconds before using her thumbs to test the rigidity of the surrounding muscle. Ben gripped the armrests of his wheelchair. He stared at the ceiling, refusing to make a sound even though his breathing grew shallow.
Tell me when it's a sharp pain, not just a dull ache.
Nora said, keeping her eyes on her work.
I can take it.
Ben muttered.
I didn't ask if you could take it, Ben. I asked you to tell me.
Nora replied calmly.
Pain is data. If you hide the data, I can't fix the hardware.
Ben looked down at her. He wasn't used to adults talking to him like a mechanic diagnosing an engine. It stripped away the pity he usually received from strangers. Slowly his grip on the chair loosened.
It's sharp near the knee.
He admitted quietly.
Thank you.
Nora said, adjusting her pressure. They sat in silence for another minute before Ben spoke again, his voice dropping to a bitter whisper.
He bought that stupid machine so he wouldn't have to touch me. So he wouldn't have to remember what he did.
Nora paused her hands.
Where he did.
The car crash.
Ben said, his eyes hardening as he looked toward the door his father had just walked through.
He was driving. He lost control. He ruined my leg, and now he just stands around acting like it's a military drill. He won't even say he's sorry.
Nora looked back down at the mangled, crushed tissue of the boy's tibia. The town gossip said the captain had crashed his truck on a slick mountain road.
Ben clearly believed that story too.
But a child's leg didn't shatter like a dropped teacup from a dashboard impact.
It crushed like a soda can under an industrial press. Arthur Vance wasn't just hiding his emotions.
He was hiding the entire truth.
And he was letting his own son hate him to protect that lie.
Nora packed away her compress.
If she was going to treat this boy, she needed facts, not the story a decorated Navy officer was feeding the neighborhood. She needed the original x-rays. The heavy side door creaked open, letting in a brief rush of cold afternoon air.
Arthur stepped back into the garage, slipping his phone into his pocket.
His expression was carefully blank, but the tension in his shoulders had tightened. Nora didn't wait for him to settle.
Captain Vance?
She said, her voice carrying the practiced authority of a charged nurse.
The discharge paperwork from the civilian hospital is incomplete. I need the original imaging files. Specifically, the x-rays taken at the Naval Base Clinic immediately after the incident.
Arthur stopped near the tool chest. He looked at her, his dark eyes entirely unreadable.
The current file has the surgical notes. That should be sufficient for physical therapy.
It isn't!
Nora replied evenly. She stood up, crossing her arms.
The muscular trauma I'm seeing doesn't match a standard dashboard impact. If I'm going to put a 90-pound boy into a $400,000 exoskeleton, I need to know exactly how the underlying bone fragments were pinned. I need the military records.
Ben watched them from his wheelchair, his eyes shifting between his father and the nurse.
He looked almost satisfied to see someone finally challenging the captain.
Arthur's posture grew rigid. The quiet, accommodating father from 10 minutes ago vanished, replaced instantly by a military commander who was entirely used to being obeyed.
My son's military medical records are classified Ms. Davies.
Arthur said, his voice low and firm.
Your job is to help him build the strength to use the stride, not to audit my family's history. If you can't work with the civilian file, I will find an agency that can.
It was a dismissal.
A clear, heavily reinforced boundary. Nora held his gaze for 3 long seconds. She didn't back down, but she recognized a wall when she saw one.
Fine. We start with basic mobility tomorrow at 8.
Arthur nodded curtly.
He turned his back to her, reaching under the workbench to pull out a small cardboard moving box.
As she packed her medical bag, Nora let her eyes linger on the box.
It wasn't full of spare parts. Inside were several velvet presentation cases, a set of silver Navy challenge coins, and a vintage gold watch. Arthur wasn't packing them away for storage. He was bubble wrapping them.
Nora glanced at the massive gleaming apex stride in the corner.
TRICARE and military health insurance didn't cover experimental robotics. The town thought Arthur Vance was an arrogant man who bought his way out of guilt. But Nora realised, looking at the velvet boxes, that the captain was quietly selling off his entire past to buy his son a future. And he wasn't telling anyone. Nora didn't plan on returning to the Vance house that night.
But when she realised her medical tablet was still sitting on Arthur's workbench, she had no choice. It was past 9 o'clock.
The main house was completely dark, but a single yellow light spilled out from the garage window. She walked up the driveway, her footsteps crunching quietly on the gravel. The side door was propped open.
Arthur was sitting on a metal stool, his back to the door.
He wasn't working on the Apex Stride. He was staring at a stack of thick watermarked envelopes. Invoices.
I forgot my tablet.
Nora said softly, not wanting to startle a man with 3 combat tours. Arthur didn't jump. He slowly gathered the papers, sliding them under a heavy wrench, and turned around. The exhaustion on his face was startling. The rigid, immovable captain from that afternoon was gone, replaced by a man who looked like he hadn't slept a full night in 8 months.
It's right there, Ms. Davies.
He said, his voice rough with fatigue.
Nora stepped inside and picked up her tablet.
But she didn't turn to leave. She looked at the stack of bills, then at the sealed cardboard box containing his medals and the vintage watch.
The Stride costs $400,000.
Nora said quietly.
TRICARE and military insurance usually cover mobility devices for dependents involved in standard civilian motor vehicle accidents.
Arthur looked down at his calloused hands.
The military board denied the claim.
Why?
Because of the circumstances of the accident.
Arthur said flatly. The tone was a boundary, but this time there was no anger behind it. Just quiet defeat. Nora studied him. A father who was supposedly reckless and selfish wouldn't be sitting in a freezing garage quietly selling off the proudest achievements of his life just to buy his son a chance to walk.
You're paying for it entirely out of pocket.
She realised the weight of his burden suddenly clear in the cold room. Arthur finally looked up, his dark eyes meeting hers.
I would pay for it with my life if I could, but right now, all I have is cash and a pension. So if you want to help Ben, help him, but leave the rest of it alone.
Nora nodded slowly.
She walked out into the cold night air, her mind racing. The military hadn't denied the claim because of a simple car crash. They denied it because there was no car crash at all. By Thursday morning, the heavy silence in the house had become a routine. Arthur stayed out in the garage, supposedly working on the exoskeleton, while Nora conducted Ben's therapy in the living room. Ben was uncooperative, but he had stopped throwing things. Instead, he channeled his frustration into a sketchbook.
He sat on the edge of the sofa, aggressively shading a dark, jagged pencil drawing, while Nora manipulated his knee joint through a series of slow, agonizing flexes.
Breathe out. On the bend, Ben.
Nora instructed calmly. Ben gritted his teeth and exhaled, pressing his pencil down so hard the lead snapped.
He let out a frustrated sound, tossing the piece of paper onto the coffee table. It missed the edge and fluttered to the hardwood floor, landing face up.
I'm out of paper,
He muttered, leaning his head back against the cushions.
I just grabbed some junk mail from his office trash.
Nora finished the repetition, releasing his leg gently.
Take a 2-minute break. Let the muscle relax.
She bent down to retrieve the fallen paper.
As she picked it up, her eyes caught the bold, black text printed on the front.
It wasn't junk mail.
It was a partially shredded document hastily taped back together bearing the official seal of the Department of the Navy. Nora froze. It was a base medical transfer form dated exactly 8 months ago, the date of the accident. Her clinical eyes scanned the boxes immediately.
Patient Vance Benjamin, age 10. Location of incident Sector 4 Logistics Depot.
But it was the next line that made the breath catch in her throat. Mechanism of injury: patient struck by falling mechanical freight. Hydraulic forklift collapse. No motor vehicle involvement. Nora stared at the paper. There was no slick mountain road. There was no car crash.
Ben hadn't been injured because his father lost control of a truck.
He had been crushed under military freight on a naval base. She looked up at Ben, who was staring out the window. His young face hardened by months of hating his father for a mistake the captain never made. Arthur Vance had taken the blame for a horrific industrial accident. He was bankrupting himself, destroying his reputation and letting his only son hate him. And Nora was finally going to find out why. Nora walked into the kitchen. Arthur was standing by the sink, washing grease off his hands with coarse soap. She didn't say a word. She simply walked up to the island counter and placed the taped-together base medical transfer form flat on the marble.
Arthur turned off the faucet.
He saw the Department of the Navy seal. He dried his hands slowly on a towel, his broad shoulders rising and falling in a heavy, exhausted sigh.
Where did you get that
he asked quietly.
Ben was using it as scrap paper.
Nora said. She stepped closer, keeping her voice low.
A forklift collapse, Arthur. Not a car crash.
He didn't correct her use of his first name. He just looked at the paper.
Who was driving the forklift?
Nora pressed. Arthur closed his eyes for a second.
A 19-year-old kid, barely out of boot camp. He panicked at the controls when a pallet shifted. He dropped 3 tons of freight directly onto the walkway where Ben was standing.
Nora's chest tightened.
And you took the blame.
If I filed the true report, that kid would face a court-martial. Criminal negligence. Prison time. His life would be over before it started.
Arthur leaned against the counter, suddenly looking every one of his 59 years.
I was the senior officer on site. I filed a report stating I failed to secure the civilian perimeter, and I took the boy home. We made up the car crash to keep the base out of it.
So you let the Navy deny his medical coverage?
Nora said, stunned.
You're bankrupting yourself. And you're letting your own son hate you.
I can handle the money.
Arthur said, his voice thick with suppressed emotion.
And I can handle Ben's anger. I'm a father, Nora. My job is to carry the heavy things so he doesn't have to.
Arthur rubbed his temples, staring at the floor.
But I'm running out of time. If this machine doesn't work, I don't know where to send him. I can't keep him in this house like this forever. It's destroying him.
A sharp metallic clatter echoed from the hallway. Nora and Arthur both turned. Just outside the kitchen door, Ben's sketchbook lay face down on the hardwood floor. The wheels of his chair squeaked aggressively as he spun around, rolling frantically back toward his bedroom. He hadn't heard the story about the sailor. He had only heard the end. Where's to send him?
I can't keep him in this house. Arthur didn't run, but his strides down the hallway were long and urgent. Nora followed closely behind him, her heart hammering against her ribs.
They reached Ben's bedroom just as the heavy brass deadbolt slid into place with a sharp, echoing click.
Ben,
Arthur said, pressing his hand flat against the wood.
Open the door.
Leave me alone.
Ben's voice was high and splintered thick with tears he had refused to shed for 8 months.
Ben, you misunderstood what I was saying.
Arthur tried, his voice stripped of its usual military command. It was just the voice of a terrified father.
I heard you.
Ben shouted from the other side. Something heavy, probably a book, hit the door from the inside.
You said you couldn't keep me here. You said I was destroying things. You don't have to send me to a home. I'll just stay in my room.
Arthur flinched.
He closed his eyes, resting his forehead against the solid wood door. The heavy weight of his lie, the lie he had told to protect a 19-year-old stranger, was now crushing his own son. Nora stepped forward, wanting to help.
Arthur, let me talk to him.
Don't.
Arthur turned around.
The vulnerability was gone instantly, replaced by a wall of cold, impenetrable armor. He looked at Nora not as a woman he had just shared a profound truth with, but as a liability.
This is exactly why I told you to leave the past alone.
Arthur said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper so Ben wouldn't hear.
I had a system, and I had it under control. And you couldn't just do your job. You had to dig.
Your system is killing him.
Nora whispered back fiercely.
He thinks you hate him.
He is alive,
Arthur counted his jaw tight.
and he is safe. That is my only responsibility.
He stepped away from the door, creating a physical and emotional distance between them that felt vast and absolute.
Pack your equipment, Ms. Davies.
Arthur said flatly.
Your agency contract is terminated effective tomorrow morning. I will find a physical therapist who knows how to follow orders.
He walked back toward the garage, leaving Nora alone in the quiet hallway. Friday morning was bitterly cold. A thin layer of frost coated the windshield of Nora's sedan as she loaded her medical bag into the passenger seat. She had packed her things quietly, leaving the revised physical therapy schedule on the kitchen counter. The house was entirely silent. Ben hadn't come out of his room and Arthur hadn't come inside from the garage.
Nora zipped her jacket keys in hand, ready to drive away and honour the captain's demand.
Then tires crunched heavily on the gravel.
A faded 10-year-old compact car pulled into the driveway, stopping abruptly behind Arthur's truck.
The driver's side door opened before the engine was even fully shut off.
A young man stepped out.
He couldn't have been older than 19. He wore civilian clothes, a heavy hoodie and jeans, but his severe, high and tight haircut gave him away instantly. He looked terrified. His face was pale, his eyes rimmed with red, exhausted circles. He walked toward the open garage door with the stiff, frantic energy of someone marching toward a firing squad. Nora paused by her car watching. Arthur stepped out of the garage before the young man could cross the threshold. The captain looked just as exhausted as he had the night before, but his posture immediately snapped into a rigid, authoritative stance.
Petty Officer Miller.
Arthur said.
His voice was low, carrying a warning that sliced through the cold air.
You have no authorization to be off base. Get back in your vehicle.
I can't, sir.
The boy said, his voice trembling wildly. He stopped a few feet from Arthur, his hands shaking in his pockets.
I heard what happened with the medical board. I heard they denied the insurance claim for your son's robotic brace because of the report.
That is my personal business, Miller. It does not concern you.
It's $400,000.
The young sailor's voice cracked a desperate anguished sound.
You're selling your house, Captain. You're selling your medals. Because of me. Because I panicked at the controls and crushed your son's leg.
Arthur stepped forward, grabbing the boy by the shoulder, trying to force him back toward his car.
Keep your voice down. We had an agreement, son. You let me handle the fallout.
I can't let you do it anymore.
Miller choked out, tears finally spilling over his pale cheeks.
I can't sleep. I can't look at my uniform. I'm going to the JAG office, sir. I'm telling them the truth.
No, you are not.
Arthur commanded, his voice vibrating with absolute protective authority.
I gave you a direct order to live your life and become a better sailor. You will not throw it away now to ease your conscience.
Nora stood by her car, her hand tightening around her keys. Arthur Vance was practically threatening a subordinate just to keep the boy from ruining his own life. It was the most honourable, destructive thing she had ever seen, and she wasn't going to let him do it anymore. Nora didn't get into her car. Instead, she dropped her keys into her pocket, turned around and sprinted back into the silent house. She reached Ben's bedroom door and pounded on the heavy wood.
Ben,
She called out, her voice stripped of its usual clinical calm.
if you want to know if your father is sending you away, you need to come out here right now.
Silence. Then the deadbolt clicked. Ben sat in his wheelchair, his eyes red and defensive. Nora didn't wait for him to speak. She grabbed the handles of his chair, spun him around, and pushed him quickly down the hallway through the kitchen and straight out the side door into the freezing garage.
Arthur froze.
He was standing between Miller and the open driveway, his hand still gripping the young sailor's shoulder.
Nora, what the hell are you doing?
Arthur barked, true panic bleeding into his voice for the first time.
Take him back inside.
No.
Nora said. She locked the brakes on Ben's wheelchair and stepped back, leaving the 11-year-old boy directly in front of the weeping sailor. Nora looked at Miller.
You want to clear your conscience, petty officer. Tell the boy whose leg you crushed.
Arthur lunged forward to stop it.
Miller, that is a direct order, fall in and...
It was me.
Miller shouted, his voice breaking as he looked down at Ben's mangled leg. The silence that followed was absolute. Only the sound of the young sailor's ragged breathing filled the cold, oil-stained space. Ben gripped his armrests, his face pale.
What?
Miller wiped his face with a trembling hand, looking at the boy in the wheelchair.
Your dad wasn't driving. He wasn't even in a vehicle. I was operating the heavy loader at the supply depot. I didn't check my clearance. I dropped 3 tons of freight on the walkway.
Ben's breath hitched.
He looked at Arthur, who was standing completely still, his eyes closed, the heavy burden of his life finally crashing down around him.
The captain took the blame.
Miller choked out, tears falling freely.
He falsified the report so I wouldn't go to military prison. He lost his insurance, he's selling his medals, and he let everyone in town think he was a drunk driver, just to save my life.
The silence in the garage was heavy, broken only by the cold wind outside and the sound of Miller's quiet sobbing. Ben stared at his father. The hardened, angry shell the 11-year-old had worn for 8 months cracked straight down the middle. He looked past Arthur, his eyes landing on the cardboard box tucked under the workbench, the velvet cases, the challenge coins, the vintage watch. His dad hadn't ruined his life. His dad had sold his own past to buy Ben a future.
Arthur finally opened his eyes.
He looked at his son, his broad shoulders slumping, stripped of all his military armour. He looked like a man waiting for the final fatal blow.
I'm sorry, Ben.
Arthur said, his voice thick and quiet.
I didn't want you to carry the weight of someone else's mistake. I was the senior officer. It was my responsibility.
Ben didn't yell.
He didn't throw anything.
He gripped the wheels of his chair, his breathing fast, and looked up at Nora.
Put it on me.
Ben whispered, his voice trembling but fiercely determined.
Nora didn't hesitate.
She stepped back inside, lifted the heavy carbon fibre Apex stride from the workbench, and knelt in front of the boy. She secured the titanium clasps around his calf and thigh, her hands moving with swift, clinical precision. When she finished, she tapped the power button.
A low mechanical hum filled the quiet space as the servos engaged.
It's going to hurt.
Nora warned softly, looking him in the eye.
I don't care.
Ben said. He placed his hands on the armrests of his wheelchair. His knuckles went white.
With a sharp, ragged exhale, Ben pushed himself up.
The robotic knee servo whined, locking into place, bearing the weight his shattered tibia could not. Arthur took a step forward, his hands instinctively reaching out, terrified the boy would fall.
Don't.
Ben said, his voice straining with effort.
Stay there.
There were roughly 9 feet between the wheelchair and the edge of the driveway where Arthur stood. Ben took a step. His right foot hit the concrete heavily. He swayed, his face pale with sudden pain, but the machine held. He dragged his left foot forward. Then he took another step. He wasn't walking away from his father anymore. He was walking toward him. When he finally closed the distance, Ben didn't stop. He let go of his precarious balance and crashed directly into Arthur's chest. Arthur caught him dropping to his knees on the cold, oil-stained garage floor. He wrapped his strong arms tightly around his son, burying his face in the boy's shoulder, finally letting go of the heavy thing he had been carrying all alone.
Dad,
Ben whispered, his face buried in the heavy cotton of Arthur's shirt. The word echoed in the cold garage. It was the first time in 8 months the boy hadn't called him the captain or him.
Arthur closed his eyes, his large hand resting protectively on the back of his son's head.
He looked up at Petty Officer Miller, who was still standing near the driveway, wiping his face with the sleeve of his hoodie.
Go back to base, Miller.
Arthur said, his voice quiet but steady.
Do your job, make it a life worth saving, and don't come back here.
Miller nodded quickly, offering a crisp, tearful salute before turning back to his car. 6 weeks later, the brutal winter cold had fully settled over the town, but the Vance house felt entirely different.
The garage door stayed closed. The heavy carbon fibre stride exoskeleton now sat in the corner of the warm living room. Ben was sitting on the sofa, unstrapping the leg braces with practiced ease. He was laughing at something Nora had said, his face bright and completely devoid of the jagged anger that used to define him.
45 minutes today.
Nora said, checking her tablet.
Your torque control is up 12%. You're making the machine work for you, not the other way around.
I told you I was tough.
Ben grinning.
You're stubborn.
Nora corrected with a warm smile.
There's a difference.
Arthur walked into the living room holding 2 mugs of black coffee.
He didn't look like a guarded, exhausted commander anymore. The deep lines of stress around his eyes had softened. He handed a mug to Nora, their fingers brushing briefly against the warm ceramic.
I've got homework.
Ben announced, grabbing his backpack. He looked at Nora, then at his dad, a small, knowing smile on his face.
I'll do it in my room. Take your time.
As the boy walked down the hallway, a slight limp, but moving entirely under his own power, Arthur watched him with quiet awe. He turned to Nora. The cardboard box of velvet medal cases wasn't in the garage anymore.
It was back in Arthur's office, right next to the grant approval letter from the Wounded Veterans Foundation that Nora had quietly contacted on his behalf.
I fired you.
Arthur reminded her softly, leaning against the doorframe.
I don't follow bad orders.
Nora replied, taking a sip of her coffee. Arthur looked at her. He looked at the calm, brilliant woman who had refused to let him destroy himself for the sake of his pride. He reached out gently, taking the tablet from her hand and setting it on the table. Then he took her hand in his. His grip was warm, solid, and entirely intentional.
I spent my whole life being the shield for everyone else.
Arthur said, his voice thick with emotion.
I didn't think I was allowed to put it down. I didn't think anyone would be there to catch us if I did.
You don't have to carry it alone anymore, Arthur.
Nora said quietly, looking up into his dark, weathered eyes.
Then stay.
He asked. It wasn't a military command. It was the vulnerable, honest plea of a man who had finally found his home.
Don't just be his nurse, stay with us.
Nora smiled, her thumb gently tracing the calloused skin of his knuckles.
I'm not going anywhere.
For the first time in years, the captain had nothing left to hide and absolutely everything to live for.
If this story stayed with you, that's exactly what our channel is here for. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from and which moment hit you the hardest.
Share this with someone who needs a reminder that quiet people often carry the heaviest things. And subscribe so the next hidden hero finds you too.